Welcome to the Half-Life 2 Episode 1 Anniversary Edition. Trying to get out by the train.
Usually, the second step of our training arcs involve a threatening training area. This is the second step in the roller mine training. In true to form, there's the threat. The indestructible roller mines endlessly attack the player in invaded space. The only way to defeat them is to have Alex convert them, which means there's no way the player can miss the point of the training. Players also like to see the AI characters fight each other. So after reminding the player about Alex's roller mine hacking talent, we let you sick them on a pack of Combine soldiers.
Company. Won't be expecting this. Look at him go!
Stupid.
Coast is clear. This is our train. Let's get in. Come on, let's get in.
Ouch.
In much the
Well,
same way
that's a
that
clean
movie effects
getaway.
often utilize different versions
I don't
of
know
the same
what's
model,
in this coffee
there are
mug,
actually
but
three
they're not
trains that
thrilled
make
about
up
us
the
having
Stalker
it.
scene.
You know,
The
all
first
things
one
considered,
is the moving train
we're
you
not
see
too-
arrive at the platform. The one you're in right now is a static
It's a
interior
Stalker
with
car.
lights moving outside of it to give the illusion of motion. The third train
Damn,
is the crash
Combine.
version. It's a tilted, banged up,
This is
and
what
totally
happens to
separate
you
area
if
from
you
the moving
resist.
version. The transition from moving to crashed is disguised by a brief fade to black.
Or if you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
We're static.
Alex's reaction to the Stalkers went through a number of iterations.
You don't
In very early versions, Alex was frightened by the Stalkers. That didn't work because it didn't fit with
see
Alex's
where this
earlier
train is
reactions
headed.
to Stalkers in the Citadel. We changed it so that she expressed anger at the Stalkers' predicament.
With any luck,
Early
we should be well
versions
out
of
of
this
the
new
city before
direction
it's
failed
too late.
because Alex's transition from generally upbeat to blind rage
Thank
was
God we're
simply
not
too
on
abrupt.
foot.
Ultimately, through rewrites and rigorous testing, we
Let's
found
hope
the
the
right
worst is
tone for
over.
the scene, a simmering anger level that was more in tune with the situation.
Looks like you saved our lives again. What's that?
Alex's reaction to the Stalkers went through a number of iterations. In very early
my God.
versions, Alex was frightened by the Stalkers. That didn't work because it didn't fit with Alex's earlier
Brace
reactions
yourself.
to Stalkers in the Citadel. We changed it so that she expressed anger at the Stalkers' predicament. Early versions of this new direction failed because Alex's transition from generally upbeat to blind rage was simply too abrupt. Ultimately, through rewrites and rigorous testing, we found the right tone for the scene, a simmering anger level that was more in tune with the situation.
Oh God, help! That's it. Keep pulling.
That's funny.
We wanted the crash train car to be very disorienting. In early tests, though, players felt that it was too confusing and too hard to navigate. That feedback prompted us to tone it down a bit. By rearranging some of the geometry, we were able to create a banged up We wanted the crash train car to be very disorienting.
Low life.
In early tests, though, players felt that it was too confusing
Hold
and
up a
too hard
sec.
to navigate. That feedback prompted us to tone it down
I
a
gotta
bit.
catch my breath.
By rearranging some of the geometry, we were able to create a banged-up, tilted environment that still offered a relatively unobstructed path to Alex.
Well, this might not be as easy as I thought.
This is another
Same
multi-purpose
boat as the
scene.
other evacuees.
First, Alex is visibly shaken,
On
which
foot
once
to
again
retreat.
humanizes her. But she also states the player's goal for the second half of the game: climb to the surface and get to the train station.
Careful. I hear turtles. Damn, it's got a powered lock. How are we gonna get this open? What? Hey, an air duct. I've heard stories about you and air duct.
Before we armed players with traditional weapons, we wanted to give them a chance to appreciate Alex's combat abilities. Toward that goal, we created a very specific combat style for the early parts of the journey outside the Citadel. Dark, tense, surrounded by zombies, and either weaponless or starved for ammo, so that players needed to rely on the gravity gun, and more importantly, Alex. This is where players finally get a weapon. Since the door only opens when the padlock is shot, players can't proceed without finding the pistol. It's effectively a weapon game. Once players are through the door, we can be sure they've got a pistol.
Originally, the player couldn't operate the power boxes and would have to wait for Alex to do it. We thought it'd be entertaining to watch Alex do some cool thing while you protected her. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. Playtesters were more annoyed than entertained. The other problem was that having Alex committed to a particular activity while action was still going on in the world tended to quickly expose her most robotic tendencies. She'd either ignore what was going on or completely stop whatever activity the player was waiting for her to finish. Either way, it was unconvincing.
We
Wow.
wanted the crash train car to be very disorienting. In early tests, though, players felt that it was too confusing and too hard to navigate. That feedback prompted us to tone it down a bit. By rearranging some of the geometry, we were able to create a banged-up, tilted environment that still offered a relatively unobstructed path to Alex.
Originally, the player couldn't operate the power boxes and would have to wait for Alex to do it. We thought it'd be entertaining to watch Alex do some cool thing while you protected her.
Found a gun.
Unfortunately, that didn't work out. Playtesters were more annoyed than entertained. The other problem was that having Alex committed to a particular activity while action was still going on in the world tended to quickly expose her most robotic tendencies. She'd either ignore what was going on or completely stop whatever activity the player was waiting for her to finish. Either way, it was unconvincing and frustrating. What we learned here was that whenever Alex commits to some action in a dynamic environment, she needs to finish it quickly and move on.
out on that zombie.
Initially, the player wasn't going to have a weapon here. The combination of no weapon and near total darkness forced the player to use the flashlight to direct Alex's fire. We liked the idea that you could interact with Alex in a meaningful way using elements that were already built into the
Makes
interface.
sense if it was powered.
Unfortunately, playtesters didn't like not having a weapon, so we added weapons back in. Luckily, it turned out that, even armed, players tended to still use and enjoy the flashlight mechanic.
Looks like we found a troop train. What the hell is that? A combine zombie. That's like a zombine, right? Zombine, get it?
If you don't like Alex, you're not going to have much fun with episode 1. So Alex being likable was one of our most crucial design goals. Little moments like the Zombine joke are designed to
Look
make
out!
Alex more
It's got a
endearing.
grenade!
Since we like to multitask, it also has the practical purpose of introducing a new monster. The success of the scene relied on a combination of dialogue,
Keep
voice
your light on
acting, and
that zombie.
animation. Surprisingly, lighting was really important too. Under red light, Alex's self-deprecating groan looked more like she was sneering at the player for not getting the joke. Changing the lighting to blue and then adjusting the direction of the light so that it changed the shadows in her face fixed the problem.
It's important that monsters get very deliberate introductions, since players are going to interact with them a lot. Generally, we let the player first see a new monster in a safe environment, so they can start thinking about it before they have to fight it.
Light that thing
The
up!
soundtrack here was created for the introduction of a new adversary, the Combine Zombie, or Zombine. Discordant guitar tones and bends and a lo-fi fast beat work in the background of this encounter to create an off-balance and disturbing mood.
We always try to exploit a feature as much as possible throughout a game. For instance, these flares. They're an exploration reward. They've got a simple, satisfying interaction with the gravity gun, and they're a good tactical alternative to the flashlight. Finally, they're a weapon that will ignite zombies, which in turn become a new light source.
For episode 1, we implemented a scripting component called the Response Rules System for dynamically managing NPC speech. We wanted to take NPC speech out of the hands of the programmers and let the writers control it. The writers were able to set up a wide range of situationally triggered character responses. For instance, Alex has different reactions to different enemies, can warn the player of danger, calls for help when she's mobbed, and will ask for light. The combat responses worked out great, but it's especially satisfying when Alex's comments on some situation mirror your own thoughts. The writers really went crazy with this, so be on the lookout for lots of little Easter egg responses to unusual situations.
Light that thing up!
Come on, Alex.
I hate these things.
The antlion hole training is unusual because it requires the player to learn a new skill in combat. This is a rare case where training occurs under duress, so Alex states the problem and helps in the fight without giving away the solution.
Knock them over, Gordon.
You fight alongside Alex for much of episode 1, so her combat really needed to look varied and exciting. We especially wanted to get her into some kind of convincing physical contact with her enemies. We'd always wanted to do this kind of dynamic character interaction, but getting the NPCs into position for their interactions has a pretty wide-ranging set of problems. So we ended up taking an opportunistic approach for episode 1, where instead of figuring out how to maneuver characters into proximity, the system monitors their positions and fires the appropriate animations whenever it notices that they're correctly aligned. Given how well these interactions worked out between Alex and zombies, headcrabs and antlions, we're really looking forward to extending this kind of behavior to all of our NPCs.
Detected. Warning. Vital signs critical.
I wonder how headcrabs turn combine to zombies if they have this helmet. Shit.
This 3-level parking garage is where the antlion burrow training pays off. Because we've taught the player the burrow blocking mechanic earlier in a less hectic environment, the problem here becomes not what to do with the burrows, but where to find the cars to block them while fighting off a horde of antlions. The burrows themselves went through several iterations. At first, playtesters had a hard time seeing them, and once they'd push the car onto one, they often weren't sure if the hole was actually sealed. We eventually solved both of these problems by adding a particle effect to the burrows. This effect makes them recognizable even at a distance, and its absence is a clear indication that the burrow is blocked. This 3-level parking garage is where the antlion burrow training pays off. Because we've taught the player the burrow blocking mechanic earlier in a less hectic environment, the problem here becomes not what to do with the burrows, but where to find the cars to block them while fighting off a horde of antlions. The burrows themselves went through several iterations. At first, playtesters had a hard time seeing them, and once they'd push the car onto one, they often weren't sure if the hole was actually sealed. We eventually solved both of these problems by adding a particle effect to the burrows. This effect makes them recognizable even at a distance, and its absence is a clear indication that the burrow is blocked.
Headless, look. Under. There's no head. Where's Alex?
We generally design and prototype the basic gameplay in a level before we apply much art to it. Throughout the first several months of playtesting this garage map, the geometry was nothing more than basic shapes and textures. After we finalized most of the gameplay elements, we began to flesh out the visuals for the area. For this level, we left the office and took reference pictures of various garages. From these shots, we pulled out everything we liked and that we thought we could pull off well. We combined these visual highlights into what we call a style guide map, which is a standalone map with no gameplay that we use strictly as visual reference. For this level, we actually made two style guides, one a destroyed garage, the other intact. After the look was established, we brought the playable map's visual quality up to the level of the style guides. Often a map's geometry needs to be changed as the art goes in because areas that worked in the abstract version no longer make sense in a map that now looks like a real place. For instance, the side rooms where two of the cars are hidden were moved several times in order to make them feel more naturally part of the parking garage.
You're lucky you've got that hazard suit. This water's nasty. Got room for two in there?
Episode 1 is our first project to use HDR lighting heavily in dark indoor environments. The interaction between the flashlight and the auto exposure calculations done for HDR presented a real technical challenge. In dark areas where the flashlight was the only source of illumination, we found that we'd often end up with grossly overexposed views. We ended up compensating for this by using a different set of exposure parameters when the flashlight was turned on.
I don't believe it's an actual
In particular, we drastically shrunk the region of the screen examined for exposure calculations, which permitted us to concentrate only on the much smaller area lit by the flashlight.
got to be kidding. I've worked with electricity a time or two, and I'm pretty sure the sparking wire must be connected to a power supply.
This area is the dramatic culmination of all the lightless combat that comes before it. We wanted to create a dynamic fight that lasted several minutes while you waited for the elevator to arrive. The first iteration of this battle was very different from what we eventually shipped. The space was larger, had water in it, and wasn't completely dark. Water is relatively expensive performance-wise, so we cut that in favor of more zombies. We made the level smaller to ensure that the player would see the elevator and recognize the problem that needed to be solved before the fight started. We killed the lights both to enhance tension and to make the scene a final test of the dark fighting skills that the player develops over the course of the episode. Finally, we added a wire running along the ceiling from the elevator to the power box to give players a guide as they familiarize themselves with the area.
Our art and gameplay standards encourage players to build a visual dictionary that defines how they expect things to work in the Half-Life world. For instance, even though the door to the power box room is metal and would probably have a metal crossbar holding it shut, we barred it with a wooden plank. Because we've been consistent throughout the game, the player should recognize that a wooden plank can be both broken and manipulated with a gravity gun, properties that wouldn't be immediately apparent about a metal bar.
What?
Episode 1 is our first project to use HDR lighting heavily in dark indoor environments. The interaction between the flashlight and the auto exposure calculations done for HDR presented a real technical challenge. In dark areas where the flashlight was the only source of illumination, we found that we'd often end up with grossly overexposed views. We ended up compensating for this by using a different set of exposure parameters when the flashlight was turned on. In particular, we drastically shrunk the region of the screen examined for exposure calculations, which permitted us to concentrate only on the much smaller area lit by the flashlight.
I've worked with electricity a time.
In early versions of the episode, Alex was much more vocal about giving the player hints. However, playtests showed it was much more satisfying for the players when Alex stated a goal and then stepped aside until that goal was accomplished. Because of that feedback, almost all of Alex's hint lines were cut. Eventually, though, we discovered through more playtesting that although players didn't like having Alex hand them unsolicited hints, they did want to be able to explicitly request help from him. So we added some of the hint dialogue back in, but it's only accessible at the player's request by Plus using Alex. Unfortunately, we learned these hint lessons late in the development cycle and didn't have time to properly train players for this feature. We plan to integrate the hint-on-demand dialogue more thoroughly in future episodes.
We're really happy with the Zombine's grenade
And
behavior.
here comes trouble.
It adds sudden danger spikes to the zombie horde, which force players to quickly reprioritize the targets. And since the player can grab a grenade out of the Zombine stand with a gravity gun, these danger spikes can be converted into offensive opportunity. This kind of turnaround skill shot creates some dynamic, satisfying hero moments for the player. Originally, we didn't allow the player to snatch Zombine grenades because we barely broke the fiction of the gravity gun. If players could grab a Zombine's grenade, why couldn't they grab the Combine soldiers' guns? After playtesting the grenade skill though, fun went out of the consistency.
What's taking so long?
In early versions of the episode,
Hey, I
Alex
hear
was
the
much
elevator.
more
It's
vocal
moving
about
again.
giving the player hints.
We're really happy with the Zombine's grenade behavior. It adds sudden danger spikes to the zombie
here
horde,
comes
which
trouble.
force players to quickly reprioritize the targets. And since the player can grab a grenade out of the Zombine stand with a gravity gun, these danger spikes can be converted into offensive opportunities. This kind of turnaround skill shot creates some dynamic, satisfying hero moments for the player. Originally, we didn't allow the player to snatch Zombine grenades because we barely broke the friction of the gravity gun. If players could grab a Zombine grenade, why couldn't they grab the Combine soldiers' guns? After playtesting the grenade steal though, fun went out of the system.
Get out of here. Phew. That was close.
Yep.
Oh my god. I hope it's still light out.
One ammo.
Thank God, it's still day. Let's get out of here. Oh God, no. No, it's locked. I can't believe this. Hey, up there! They can't hear us, I guess. Can you see any way to get this open? Those phones haven't worked in years. That's it. See if the crank still works. Come on, Gordon, crank that thing. Great. Okay, let's get to the train yard before the Citadel blows.
Thus, for the time being,
Finally, fresh air.
portals have failed
Oh my God.
as well as all
Strider's really tore the hell
based on that technology. In short, the Combine are completely cut off. Combine forces currently stationed on Earth
I've
are now
never been
isolated
happier to
units,
see Dr. Kleiner.
stranded. However, this is most likely a temporary state of affairs. As we once learned to our dismay, even the relatively
This City 17 Vista is an explicit visual reward for surviving the elevator battle. Since early playtesters told us that we weren't communicating just how damaged the city was, This sweeping view of an extremely messed up City 17 serves a practical purpose, as well as being a nice moment of calm between storms. The framing of your first view of the Citadel in this vista space is very deliberate. We included various leading elements, such as wires and light poles, that all drive the player's eye to the Citadel.
We have made, in secret, several
One thing we try to do when we're integrating storytelling and gameplay, something that's become a hallmark of ours, is to include nonlinear bits of narrative. Things that action-oriented players don't have to sit through, but that are available to players who want to learn more about the background of the story. Kleiner's broadcasts on the public address monitors are a good example of this method. Apart from the strong visual image of Dr. Kleiner replacing his former boss on the giant screens, his speech conveys a lot of dense information about the state of the world and how things have changed due to the events of Half-Life 2. We settled on this particular location for the Kleiner cast as one of the few logical places where players can watch in peace or move on to the next encounter. It's essentially a footnote embedded in the world, which makes this a footnote on a footnote.
Alright, footnote on a footnote. Let's end this episode here. Not episode 1, episode. Let's see you later.